Hi, my name is Becky Bergman and I work at the Division for Language and Communication at Chalmers. This video focuses on style and register in writing, in particular how to choose the right level of formality in different text types. In order to understand the importance of style and register, let's consider the denotation, that is what a word means, and the connotation, what a word implies. In the first example, home can be defined as a building or other shelter where someone lives. The connotation of home, though, is much cosier, implying warmth, comfort, and affection. In the second example, the sentence, "I think your company does some really cool stuff," means I like what your company does. The connotation, though, could be the opposite. If this message is said in an application letter or interview, the company will probably interpret the message as inappropriate, vague, and sloppy, since the candidate does not specify what they like about the company and uses inappropriate and casual language. So a positive message actually makes a negative impression. So why is it important to use the right style? Choosing the right style is important in making the right impression, which can lead to, for example, getting the job you want or being published where you want. Technical writing is very often written using formal language. Take a quick look at these two texts about smoke detectors. Which one is more formal? Clearly, the first one is more formal. What is it that makes the first text more formal? Pause the film and think of at least 3 reasons why the first text is more formal. How many formal and informal aspects did you find? There are many possibilities. One aspect is choice of words. Let's focus on the verbs here. More formal verbs tend to be longer and have Latin origins. More informal verbs tend to be shorter verbs, sometimes so-called phrasal verbs consisting of a verb and preposition. In this example, consists of is more formal than made up of. Another aspect is sentence structure and punctuation. More formal texts tend to contain more complex sentences, whereas a more informal text will contain more direct questions and exclamation marks. A third aspect is how personal you are. More formal texts tend to be more impersonal, whereas a more informal text will contain more personal pronouns. Maybe you found some more aspects. A fourth aspect is use of so-called contractions. This is where words are put together, like isn't instead of is not. More formal texts tend to avoid contractions, whereas a more informal text will use these since the language is more spoken-like. Since the language is more spoken, informal text can also include more conversational type phrases like well and you know. So to sum up, formal texts tend to have longer, often Latin-based verbs. Informal texts use shorter verbs like get and phrasal verbs like made up of. Informal texts are more impersonal, whereas informal texts use more personal pronouns. Formal texts contain more complex sentences, whereas informal texts use simple sentences, direct questions and exclamations. Finally, informal texts use more contractions like isn't and won't, and more colloquialisms and slang like you know. There are other aspects to consider as well, and you should check the writing guide for this information. How does this work in technical writing then? As I've already mentioned, technical writing is often formal, for example in technical texts. Take a look at the following examples. and see if you can see why they could be problematic in a technical report. You might have noticed the use of you in this question. You might also have noticed that it's written as a direct question, which is more informal. In the second example, you is also used, and the contraction there. You might also have reacted to the rather informal verb stick. So how can this be improved to make a more formal impression? Pause the video and take a look. In the first example, one way is to turn the question into a sentence by creating a longer subject. Care is needed, though, that the subject does not become too long and complex. In the second example, one way to make it more impersonal is to use the passive. The verbs can also be rewritten to make a more formal impression. Beware, though, that it's important to find the right level. If your text is too formal and complex, you'll lose your intended reader. What the writer wanted to say here was the well-known English expression, "Don't beat a dead horse." To sum up, what you are going to write, who you are going to write to, and why you are going to write should decide how you're going to write. And you need to be aware of the impact your language will make. Don't forget to utilise our other resources like the writing guide for more information. Thank you for your attention and see you next time.